Any career. He was a teacher, he's done other things, he's now a financial advisor, but perhaps his most important role is the founder of CollaBOOrations, which has headed off any sort of security safety concerns that can happen on Halloween. And he's now expanding it to address teen takeovers. And his idea is building community, and community needs to be out. We need to be able to collaborate with teens, offer them alternatives. Um, if we're in the street, then they're not going to be able to jump on our cars. So it's all, Benny has many more details. So let me stop and turn it over to Benny. Thank you so very much for what you do and for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Susan, for inviting me. And if you guys will indulge, I am going to keep myself honest, share my screen, and can someone just say yes if you can see my slides?
Yeah, it looks
Good,
good. Perfect.
great. So, like Susan mentioned, CollaBOOration has kind of expanded or morphed into also this effort called Convergence, which generally is a rapid response to the mass gatherings of young people, also known as trends or takeovers in our neighborhood. And, and before I get into that, I'm going to just kind of take you all the way back to the beginning as to how I ended up where I am today with all of this. So, like Susan mentioned, by day, I am a financial advisor. I try to focus on helping people find tax efficient streams of income for retirement. And it was on one evening of Halloween when I was looking to do this, meet with a client at 7 o'clock on 53rd Street at the Polsky Exchange, which is the business incubator owned by the University of Chicago. They've got space above the Five Guys, and I live on Dorchester. I made my way up to 53rd Street, dressed in a Halloween costume, coincidentally. Um, and I couldn't get down the sidewalk. When I got down the sidewalk, this is what I saw. It was the first of several and over a decade long run of quote unquote teen takeovers on Halloween. Back then, the organizers called it a purge based on a horror movie. As much as I like horror films, I've never seen these purge movies, but that's what that was called. And sidewalk was overwhelmed with kids. I could barely get down the street. Went and had my meeting. When I left, it was even worse. And the next morning, I got up and called the chamber and the SCCC and Office of Civic Engagement at the university and anybody else that would answer and to say, what the heck was that? And we can't have that. This is not good. Police and kids fighting and just chaos going on the street. So started getting involved, and I got connected with a Dr. Rachel Kane, who's now, I think, in Maryland, a pediatrician who really wanted to help us meet these teens where they were, but keep things calm at the same time. And Maggie Brown, you may know that name, she was involved, the Blue Gargoyle and what have you. And we were doing some things to try and mitigate some of this stuff for the next Halloween, which is now 2017. Well, we had some pockets of success, but this was still a thing. It was still a growing thing because the next year, 2018, was kind of the apex of the chaos. There was activity going on 53rd Street, but most of it was focused on the little kids, and the teens kind of disrupted all of that. And when the police came in, it was pretty fierce. And a lot was going on. Teens were setting off M80s, these large fireworks. One M80 was tossed into a car that ignited. Lives on, I believe, Kimbark, next to Nichols Park. Was had his head cracked open. It was pretty crazy. I was outside doing the volunteer work outside of McDonald's on Lake Park when a smoking cop literally slapped a teen who was doing what he was supposed to do, which was leaving the parking lot because they had shut down McDonald's. It was with a young lady, and he was minding his own business, and that was horrible and shocking. And before I could do or say or think anymore about how to react to what I just saw, I started getting texts that the kids had mobbed up and they moved their way to Walgreens and they ransacked that, and the police were following them as they made their way westward to Ridgewood Court, which is where this car is. A couple of dozen cars were damaged. Kids jumped on them, smashed the windows, and what have you. It's all in the news, and it was insane on every front you can imagine. And so the next year there was a community meeting by then Alderman and Leslie Harrison to try and address this. And if I can stop coughing, I thought about I noticed that what we were talking about wasn't really going to stop what had just occurred. So I remembered that just a second. I live around the corner from I wasn't coughing all day and now I'm coughing. So just a second. This bug will be gone soon, I hope. So sorry for that. Let me get back to the slide. So I live around the corner from Kenwood High School, which has an open campus. And for years, back in the 90s in particular, the kids used to take over my alleys, so to speak. And rather than calling the cops, I would leash up my Alaskan Malamute because he looks like a wolf to scare them away. So at that meeting, I raised my hand and said, on Halloween, we should do that. We should, walk our dogs, come outside, light up our street, make it look like we're at home, even if we're not, and make it, less of an attraction to act out, to stand out front and give out our treats and what have you. And in this photograph, you can see that that's being done during the pandemic. So someone was giving treats out through that chute there for social distancing and all of that. And that's kind of how CollaBOOration was born. Sophia King said, that's a great idea. You need to get going with that. I had no plan, but I ended up doing so. And we ended up with about 20 to 25 blocks with block captains or block activation leaders on them, with my objective to have people like that from the lakefront to Cottage Grove, from the Midway all the way to 47th Street. We haven't covered all of those areas, but we do have a lot of people who are on this team, including some folks on this call, like Linda Roberts and Susan Alito. And so we had some success with this. In fact, 8 years, we went with 0 arrests. And I mean, we were making the headlines and things of that nature. 21, started partnering with Thaddeus Toots, that's the jazz musician in the pointy hat, who on his own had decided that he should get involved in Hyde Park. And he had a master's in music therapy. So he knew that bringing music to 53rd Street could help quell some of the detention. As you can see, these kids were enjoying it, making YouTube videos and stuff. And I've actually witnessed his band defray some of the tension when kids were trying to have a fight, actually right behind them there on Dorchester. The police were there, but the band played their music. The kids broke up. It was great. So again, we went 3 straight years with no arrests, which is one of our objectives. Also, no vandalism of any, major consequence. And, at the end of the night, happy Halloween. That's what we were shooting to do. But in 2024, things began to change, and we saw 3 arrests that year. Last Halloween, 6 arrests. And if that is the trend of, so to speak, that was beginning to occur, that meant that this year, on the 10th anniversary of the original Teen Purge, we're going to have 12 arrests, or something thereabouts. We can't have that. So I felt like we needed to do more, particularly since Halloween will be on a Saturday this year. The curfew's at 11 o'clock. There's no school to keep kids kind of occupied. It could be a madhouse. So I'm working with Thaddeus Toots and the alderman and others to curate a more controlled environment where 53rd Street, that's the proposal, would be closed to traffic for a certain amount of time. We'll work all those details out, probably from Harper to Dorchester. Man, and Thriller on 53rd Street is the name of it in just a second. I'm going to have to drink some water again. So sorry for those interruptions. Apparently talking makes me cough. Not happy about that, but kind of give you the details on where we're going with this for the Halloween, because that's going to be a significant thing. Halloween's not until October, but we're in the middle of planning right now, and there'll be more details about that. But one key detail about it is that, we need to raise money. So in the chat, it's a link to the website. In the chat is a link to the donation page, which takes you to the Blue Gargoyle, which is the fiscal sponsor for what we do. They handle all of that. You can make a donation to them, and then they use the money to help us pay the band members and buy treats and stuff like that. And it's all tax deductible. As a matter of fact, we just picked up a grant for $2,500 today from the UChicago Office of Civic Engagement. So that's very encouraging. So that's kind of down the road. But more immediately, what we've been seeing is an uptick in these takeover type activities, starting this year, particularly on March the 30th, when it was 80 degrees and the kids were in Nichols Park, and then they ended up jumping on cars. So when that occurred, I heard that the police knew about it because they monitor some social media traffic, but yet they didn't tell me about it, and I told them, had you told me, I'd have 3 block captains between 51st and 53rd Street that could have gotten people out to be outside, maybe even in their cars, what have you, so that when the kids got pushed out of Nichols Park, they would have thought twice about doing all the damage that ended up occurring with people's cars and what have you. So they said, fine, we'll let you know in advance about these things. And so in April, they heard about a teen takeover, and Trey Pugh, the owner of Sip and Saber on 53rd and Hyde Park Boulevard, decided to organize a parent takeover. I heard about it and thought, that's not a bad idea. And so a lot of my volunteers also decided to come out to 53rd Street and do the same. In this photograph are people, the principal of Kenwood is there and some of her teachers. So you can imagine what the kids thought when they saw their teachers there. They kept going, but a lot of kids that heard about this didn't even show up. So you could say we had a victory, so to speak. We averted a planned takeover. I didn't like the term takeover, though. I did think this tactic made sense, but I thought calling it a takeover didn't make a lot of sense, since you can't take over your own neighborhood when you already live in the neighborhood. Plus, it sounds kind of contentious, and it might, encourage people to engage in confrontations with these kids in a negative way, which is not at all what I believe we should be doing, or what I think is at all necessary. So I said, why don't we just call it convergence? And it's what the word suggests, that people from all parts of the neighborhood, whether it's business owners, residents, allies of Hyde Park, because sometimes people from Brownsville and Woodlawn will join us and come out. That certainly was the case on April the 14th when we had that parent event. And so that's kind of what it's about. I call it collaboration in real time. In other words, if I got a alert today that there's going to be a takeover of Harper Court at 5 o'clock this Friday, I would put the word out that that's happening, and ask folks to come out, or maybe to walk their dogs at that time, or to schedule that time to pick up their food, whatever, just to make sure that there's a large visible presence of adults, of local folks, etc., in that space before the kids get there. When they get there, they might join in and what have you, or they might decide, it's too lame because we're old. But that's the idea. So in the chat is also a link to the WhatsApp application where you will then be on the text chain, if you will, for that alert if you want to be a part of that. Now, that's kind of the initial aspect of it. What I hope to be able to do down the road is to make it more of a rapid response where we might even actually be able to have music if it's going to be in Harper or food trucks or things like that, so that the sense that we are being welcoming, or that you don't just need to show up and, well, I'm going to go to this other picture here and just hang out in your hoodies with nothing nothing to do, because that's kind of what happens sometimes. They've been organized and asked to come out, but there's nothing for them to do. They're just looking to come to Hyde Park because they got a text saying show up at Sweet Green or Harper Court, at this date and this time. They're in their hoodies, I assume, so the video doesn't capture them. The parents probably don't know they're there, but they're just kind of hanging out. No different from folks who were hot rodding at one point, or folks hanging out at the skating rink back in the day, and all those other things. Things have changed, and kids don't seem to have as much latitude in certain neighborhoods as they used to. Hyde Park is such a attractive place for them to come and convene. We've got to be flexible in how we deal with that. So I'm going to go back here. So I was looking for some of the photos for this presentation, and when I put in teen takeovers in Hyde Park, the AI assistant gave me this definition, which is at the top part pretty accurate. Teen takeovers in Chicago's Hyde Park neighborhood refer to massive, often social media organized flash mob gatherings, because they want to go on TikTok and YouTube and all of that, of young people that have recently resulted in severe property damage, true, localized violence, true, and major police response. Some can argue that the major police response kind of forces some of the other stuff that happens, which either way, not a good thing, and pretty much is accurate. Now, Memorial Day weekend, you probably heard about the big massive gathering at 57th Street Beach. I highlighted 1,000 teens. I don't know if that number is accurate, and I definitely don't know if it's accurate that they were all teens, because understanding that a lot of those folks were younger people, more of just a mass gathering of young people, not necessarily a quote unquote teen takeover. And yes, 3 men apparently were shot. Again, they weren't in high school, from what I understand, and that happened after they broke up the party, so to speak, at the beach, which is one of the things that I want to talk more about with the police department. Maybe talk about that tonight at the safety and security meeting for the 5th Ward that Desmond Yancey is hosting in Nichols Park. When this event on Memorial Day started out, when that teen trend on March Nichols Park started out, these people were in a public space, and if they were teenagers, it was before curfew that things kind of broke down. And by broke down, I mean maybe there was some fisticuffs and what have you between the kids. The police's response to that, I always like to say, is to go from 0, where they're just standing by watching what's going to happen, like you see here, and then going to 100, which is, okay, we're going to push them out now. They don't live in the neighborhood. They're not ready to go home yet. Where are you pushing them? In the case of 57th Street Beach, westward into the neighborhood, or in the case of Nichols Park, northward to my street. That's not a suitable outcome. And that's not something that I can control, but it's something that I want to get the police to try to work on in terms of the strategy for that. I mean, they've got their reasons for doing that, but again, if they're in a public space, what can we do to make sure that they stay in that public space, but stop the fisticuffs or whatever that is prompting the police to now move in? Those are some dynamics that may take a lot of attention and may take some time to address. And there are a number of governmental and societal factors and potential solutions that can come into play when it comes to this takeover stuff. That is going to take some time to occur. And in the meantime, some young person with a TikTok account or with a cell phone could be organizing a gathering tonight at 6 o'clock in Nichols Park, or Friday at 8 o'clock at the Hyde Park Shopping Center, or wherever it is. And summer's just now getting started, and it's very hot today. It's going to be hot all summer long. I don't want to see us having more of the kinds of things that we saw, particularly on March the 30th. But what I do want to see is more of what I saw on April 14th, where we could get together in advance and be there before the kids get there. And as this morphs, it could be just simply a visible presence and a deterrence, or it might be a visible presence where the kids show up and perhaps there's a DJ playing their music, there's line dancing or something like that. It's people having fun, maybe us having fun with them, or creating a space for them to do that on their own, because I know teenagers kind of feel like they need to be amongst themselves, and they can't do a lot of the things that they want to do necessarily and freely, like say in Roseland or in Inglewood or in South Shore, which are all communities that feed into these activities. So does the South Suburbs, by the way. And I understand there were some folks here from Plainfield, the kids, that is. So they come from a long way to get to Hyde Park. And some people will ask, well, why is that? And we have to remember, our neighborhood for generations has always been a destination for people. In the 1800s, after Lincoln was shot, where did Mary Todd Lincoln go to summer from time to time? She took the Illinois Central train all the way to Hyde Park. Some of the wealthy folks in Chicago, when this was still its own municipality, would take their horses and buggies or the Illinois Central South to Hyde Park to hang out at the beach and what have you. And then, every year since then, there's been some iteration of people coming to Hyde Park. We are that destination. And sometimes it's too much and it's more than we can handle in the way that it currently seems to exist. But I think we have to roll with those punches, so to speak, and address this situation in a more immediate concern. And it's not just me saying that. The police will tell you that they can only do so much. And frankly, when the kids come to the neighborhood and they see this wall of police like you see right here, I don't know what the message is that we're sending to them, but I think it's a negative message. They've been demonized and what have you, and they feel like everybody's focusing on them looking to do something to cause trouble. None of these kids in this photo may be the ones doing that, but somebody around the corner might do that, or might throwing a firecracker. And next thing you know, somebody runs a person, and it's kids shoving each other, and it's just chaotic. And then the police rush in and go, okay, out you go, but where are you going, and how are you making them go there, and etc. So that is a problem. But again, I like to tell people that I have been in the midst of a teen takeover of a sort every year since 2016. So I've got a decade of experience of being on the street in the middle of this stuff and surviving it, because the kids are pretty much there to deal with themselves, not with us old folks. They appreciate us dressing, wearing our orange with our pumpkins on Halloween night, giving them treats and stuff like that. They appreciate the band when it's playing. And I think they generally can get the sense that there's a welcoming attitude by our community when they see that kind of activity, as opposed to just a wall of cops. We're all hiding behind our windows, looking out to make sure that the police are arresting them or doing whatever, or complaining because they're not arresting them, and I'm not sure that they should be arresting them, that sort of thing. But that's kind of what, I try to do. This is, there's been a lot of media attention to this. We were talking about some of these ideas that I've just shared at Valoy Cafe for the Tribune a few weeks ago. And, it continues to go forward. But the main thing I want to do is make sure that we as a community are not waiting for, the police or for the mayor's office or somebody to solve this bigger issue, which is not just haunting Hyde Park or Chicago, but it's in Baltimore and Detroit and St. Louis and all across this country, particularly in blue states, from what I'm told, for whatever that means. And I don't care. I live in Hyde Park and been here for 35, 36 years, and I love it. I was very strategic when we moved to this And I think these kids are kind of strategic when they come to this neighborhood. So we just have to figure out how to not, be so negative, and figure out a way to be able to have them have their experience and us be able to have a pleasant and safe experience as well. So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully, I've answered some of your questions, but if not, I'm all ears. And I hope I won't be coughing anymore, but we shall see. And if anyone has a question, I see a lot of people unmute. So,
Benny, I have a very broad question. As you think about the community coming together to do what you beautifully describe and you've been doing for so long, do you see a particular role that we older folks might play?
Well, one role I would like to see you older folks play is if you know younger folks, to encourage them to get involved and to reach out to me to find out how to get involved. And one of the reasons why I say that is because most of the time when we're showing up for this stuff, I'm seeing a lot of these people are my friends, and like at the meeting I had for the community on Monday to talk about this stuff, Alderman Robinson pointed out that he was 44, and Alderman Yancey pointed out that he was 54. Well, I'm 64. I mean, and so I want to see more people younger than Alderman Robinson as much as possible, or at least people in their 40s, maybe parents of teenagers. So if you know people like that, getting them involved, and in some cases, maybe you're not able to physically be a part of that for some reason, but your neighbor is, but they've got, uh, kids that need some supervision. Maybe we can partner and figure some things out like that. But I want to see more of a presence like what you see on the screen. And these are definitely younger people. These are some snippets from the parade and whatever else. 57th Street Art Fair, I think I stole these photos from. But the kind of people that come out to that stuff will come out for Convergence. So being able to put the word out would be one of the things. And if nothing else, if you are to at least spend a half an hour or an hour out in Harper Court or wherever it is when we do that, I would love to see it. And I'm not asking anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do. And one of the things that I also do, by the way, is I have a document, the same kind of document, kind of language that I've used for the Black captains for Halloween night. And it just talks about how to engage. And the other thing that I'm working to do, we haven't figured out a date yet, but the University of Chicago Police Department has always been very helpful on Halloween night to do a de-escalation training session before we go out on Halloween. And I've been talking to them about doing one of these sessions perhaps sometime next month, and maybe more than one, so that people can understand, some of the things that you can say and should do, and what you should avoid trying to do. Because again, it's all about keeping things positive and enabling people to occupy space in a way, but perhaps at the same time, divert some of the negative things that come about when these mass gatherings of the young people get out of control.
And a practical question, and then I'll let other people ask questions. Other than through WhatsApp, how can we be on your group's mailing list or alert list?
I guess that's a question. So I would, right now, what I do is put out information through Good Neighbors, and I'm sure a number of you are members of that, so you can look for Good Neighbors. If I'm putting it out on WhatsApp, you'll definitely see it in Good Neighbors. You'll see it in the Hyde Park Facebook group, the Hyde Park, I guess it's Crime Watch. I always forget the name of it officially. And then there's a few other affinity Hyde Park Facebook groups as well. We love Hyde Park. Always Hyde Park, I think it's called. So and even the Hyde Park Parents group as well. So I flood social media with the Hyde Park focus as much as I can with those alerts and those asks as well. WhatsApp would be best because it would be some real-time intel on what's going on. Because, for example, I may say there may be a takeover of the park that's planned by the kids. And so if so, fantastic. But maybe at some point that goes south and now they're pushing the kids out of the park. So then I would go to WhatsApp and say my block captain that overlooks Nichols Park is telling me, hey, the kids are being pushed out of the park. So perhaps if you're on Woodlawn, Kenbark, Kenwood, and what have you, take a walk outside, go sit on your front stoop and what have you, and be aware that we want to show that visible presence. So it'll be on all fronts. And if there's any other communications channel that I haven't touched upon that might be helpful, just let me know and I'll make sure to add that to the communications distribution list.
That's very helpful. And I do not have WhatsApp, but your organization and what you're doing is important enough that when this call is over, I'm going to go out and get me a WhatsApp app.
Yeah, well, I think if you click on that link that's in the chat, and if you don't have it, I think it will.
I've already.
Guide you to download.
Yeah, I've already done that. Yep.
Yeah, I barely remember how I got it, but my neighbors, my neighbors use WhatsApp, but then for my block captains, we use GroupMe, and because we do, that's why I chose WhatsApp to kind of keep collaboration and convergence separate, because in a way they're connected, but in a way that I want to keep them separate as well. Because
okay,
yeah,
thanks.
Sure. Any other questions? Or comments?
Well, Bernie, I think you're doing a great job, but in some ways it's an uphill battle because there are a lot of us older folks in Hyde Park are a bit taken aback. Well, the media always shows the worst of what's going on. And so those of us who are not out in the community see it on our TVs, and it does not look like anything we want to get involved with.
Yeah.
And then when we hear about cars being damaged, it's been a long time since I interacted with teenagers. Maybe that's what I need to do. I'm at 83.
Well,
but
well, I'm going to say the de-escalation training is one way to help, deal with that. But keep in mind, think about and I used to be, Susan had it wrong. I wasn't a teacher. I was a journalist, and I was in public relations for a number of years. So I have a lot of skills at communicating and writing and all of that stuff that I don't necessarily use anymore, but I certainly understand how this media stuff works. And they tend to go, if it bleeds, it reads kind of a thing. And so what you're going to see when they do the news coverage is all the negatives, the broken glass and this and that and the other thing. But nothing that I'm suggesting is that, if they're jumping on cars, that's for the police to deal with. I'm not asking anyone to go into that fray and to get involved with that. What our strategy is aimed at is preventing that from happening in the first place, but without necessarily being overtly involved in that prevention. In other words, we're just standing around as a group on the corner. Here comes a group of teens who are going to try to occupy that corner, but they can't, or they won't now because we're there. And they're not really interested in, in interacting with us, let alone us being comfortable to interact with them. They want to be amongst themselves. So they may go to another corner, but they're not going to go to the corner that we are on. And if we can do that in a large number, and begin to kind of, create the idea that we have a big physical presence in our neighborhood, that's a positive presence. So we're not going to be getting into a contentious situation with the kids, but they're also going to, as they like to say, keep it moving, and I joke about that, but I'm serious in a way too. If they decide, well, we'll just take our activities to, to 31st Street or to, the Bronzeville or to the South Loop. Hopefully they can figure out some strategies to deal with that in their community. But for us, what I'm trying to do is create an atmosphere where we don't end up with just leaving it to the devices of the police to push the kids out of the park because things have gotten out of control, or out of Nichols Park, or rather Harper Court because they've gotten out of control. And now we have to deal with the remnants of that, which are the kids, ripping and running through the street with the police following behind them. And they push them out of the park, but they can't really do much else because it's not curfew. But that, just imagine being a young person and you're going through the neighborhood and there's a bunch of cops on bikes or on foot and they're just following you around. Like, that's not a good feeling. And a lot of it isn't necessarily necessary, but that is how police do that. And you have to keep in mind too, and it's maybe difficult for a lot of the folks on the call to do so because you have to walk and, it's the moccasin thing. But, when you're a Black teenager and you're in the presence of a lot of cops, there's a lot that goes on with all of that. I'm 64 years old, and when I'm in the presence of a lot of police officers and it's just me and them, I still have those feelings as well because I know what it's been like for the majority of my life, not knowing if an interaction with a police officer is going to be a positive one or a negative one. And that is something that has gone, that's a generational thing, is a cultural thing, and what have you. But that's a long-winded way of saying nothing that I'm asking you guys to consider is going to put you in a situation where you're trying to stop a bunch of folks jumping on cars and all of that stuff. That stuff you see in the media is after everything has gone downhill. What I'm trying to do is get us back in any takeover or on Halloween to where we were a few years ago, where the kids could come and do what they wanted to do. And at the end of the day, 0 arrests and no vandalism.
Bernie, could you say a little bit more about what you mean by de-escalation? I mean, I understand, I think that with the different language you're using, that helps.
It's again, I think it's kind of a tense situation when the kids first arrive in some cases, because when the police know that they're coming, what do? They deploy their squad cars and their beat cops and everything. And so we have this, armed, militia, so to speak, waiting to greet these kids. So when they enter the neighborhood, it's already a negative scene. And so if they also see people who are having fun, maybe even playing music or trying to engage with them positively, that can kind of defray some of that other tension that's going on. Because you have to keep in mind too, with the power of cell phones and social media, these kids are not completely clueless to what is going on or what we're trying to do. But they also see and hear all the stuff about teen takeovers. Just because there's a teen takeover doesn't mean that there's something bad that's going to happen. But that's how it's responded to. That is generally how it gets viewed. And it is what it is. But again, how we engage or how we are occupying the space that they may be planning to engage with each other can change that that dynamic, change that narrative. And I'm not just saying that that's a theory. I have actually seen that happen. And in fact, one Halloween, a couple of kids leaned over to me and said, "Thank you for keeping us safe." Now, why did they tell me that? Because when they got to Hyde Park that year, the police at that time thought they were doing me a favor, and they had squad cars with the lights on perpetually at every intersection all along 53rd Street. It looked like a war zone, police state or what have you. And that's how we were greeting kids coming to the neighborhood to do Halloween. And wasn't effective because the kids just came, they've come 30, 40, 50, 100 blocks from Roseland or somewhere. They're already here. They're not going anywhere. But that's how we greet them. And I think we need to greet them in a different way. So that's kind of what I'm saying when I talk about de-escalation. I'm not saying necessarily to go into a situation where kids are jumping on cars, start trying to talk them down off of the cars, or that takes a particular type of a skill that no one on this call should be expected to possess, or a task that no one should be expected to be asked to perform. I hope that makes sense. And again, I think what'll be helpful when I do that de-escalation training is to hear from police some of their strategies around, engagement, because there's always going to be some kind of engagement you have with anyone when there's a lot of people out. I mean, I literally have bumped into kids, they have been out there, and every now and then I'll just say, hey, where are you from? And tell me what neighborhood they're from, and then I'll just go, happy Halloween, have a piece of candy, thank you, and then keep going, and that's that. I don't go, do your parents know where you are? It's almost 10 o'clock. You don't start scolding somebody else's kids and stuff like that unless you know them. And even then, that may not be a wise thing to do. And that's not at all the kind of activity or behavior that I'm asking for our residents to engage in. And I'm also not asking anyone to do anything that they're not comfortable with. But for those of you who want to give it a go, I'm living proof that it can be done, and you can live to see the next day with a smile on your face.
Benny, this is Linda.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm a block captain at 54th and Dorchester, and one of the things that my neighbors have said is useful is that I will send them emails. So when I know updates and I know information, and if I know in advance, I say, okay, 3 days from now, we should be seeing this, and the neighbors have chosen to be out in the park, or they go to Harper Court to get their food, and they say that me providing them with information allows them to make decisions as to what they can and can't do. I also have had some neighbors who want the WhatsApp because they're like, sometimes it takes you a bit of time to get that information before you email us. And I'm like, I know I'm a human being. It sometimes takes me time. So some of them have said they want to sign up for the WhatsApp. And then I think the other thing is supporting where the neighbors first gathered at the coffee shop, the Sip and Savor, and supporting that business that was so willing to reach out and say, well, let's get started here. It's on the east side of the tracks. But everything is one step at the time. We had an interesting meeting at the Beat 234 meeting yesterday, and there's more work that needs to be done because a lot of our organizations work in silo. CPS here, CTA there, CPD here, UCPD there, and to have more coordination. What I heard was that continue working with the Alderman's office, because that's where some of the coordination needs to come from. And one of the things that was brought up was getting the kids home near the end of the shift, near the before curfew. And Lollapalooza was brought up again, but they plan for all those kids in Lollapalooza for a year. So everyone knows in advance where you can pick up rideshare or where the CTA buses have been routed to. And we're working more on emergent situations. So we don't necessarily have that amount of time. But there is work that needs to be done to make sure that the red line and the green line don't skip 55th Street when they're going to and from on these days that we've heard of teen takeovers. But key ingredient is communication with your neighbors and keep them informed and help them make decisions for going out or staying put and watching what's going on.
And another thing to further answer Dorothy's question about what you can do is, if you are a loyal, longtime customer of some of the businesses, particularly on 53rd Street, like Valoy or Pizza Capri or what have you, when you're talking to them, or the manager, what have you, ask them if they're supportive of this, or if you think that they should be, make sure that they hear that from you, because like Linda mentioned, too many of the entities we're all kind of siloed. The business community or the chamber may be focused on this. Uber and Lyft are not in contact with the police department who are shutting the streets down. Well, where will the Uber and Lyft drivers go to pick up the kids who need to get back home and all those sorts of things? So when you talk to business owners, please let them know that you think they need to get involved in this, because I, as a business owner, certainly believe that they should be getting involved in this, because it's their community. This is their community as well. And when things go south, unfortunately, they're the ones that end up having to pick up the pieces of glass, so to speak, if we end up with that kind of a activity. And again, the more we can be more coordinated, the better we can weather some of this activity.
I have another comment, Benny. The village is trying to get information about the village into what we call naturally occurring retirement communities, NORCs. And I'm wondering, you do such a good job of helping put all of these efforts into a context that makes sense to us community-minded people. Do you have any people on your staff, or you or I know you don't have an official staff, but who might go into a naturally occurring retirement community and give a little spiel?
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think you just heard from one who probably wouldn't mind joining me. And there's a couple of other of our members that are in my vicinity and north of my vicinity of age, for certain. That would be
I think it would be very helpful for older folks who understandably are fearful because we're not as strong and nimble as we used to be, to hear that this is a broad-based effort and what its intent is.
Yeah, and some of you may know Louise McCurry, who runs AYSO. She's always telling me we got to get fewer grandparents out. At the same time, she is a grandparent that's out there. So I mean, she would probably join me in that conversation as well. So,
well, let's. I'm willing to talk about that and see what we might get organized into some NORCs.
Great.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I have a meeting in 8 minutes, according to my this alert on my screen. So I don't want to keep you guys, but I'm certainly glad to. I hope it's been helpful.
Well, it's a very interesting and very timely, relevant topic. I greatly appreciate your good work and hope that we can support it in any way we can. So keep it going.
Apparently, I can't stop if I wanted to. So,
well, take care of that cold. So,
Benny, I do have one more question. At the public meeting that you had at Augustana the other evening, what kind of public response did you get?
Those all kinds of different comments were shared, and we had more than 100 people in the room, which was great. What's really starting to happen is I had a one-to-one with somebody in the room who had some ideas that I've captured. There's a group of people there, one of them, Jack Spicer, you may know his name, and some other folks from the community have scheduled a meeting with me on Friday to give me what they think we should be doing and what have you. And I can't wait to see and hear from that. A good friend of mine, Linda Swift, had to leave early, but she sent me an email with a bunch of ideas. So I'm putting it all into a document. And the one takeaway was we can't just have that one meeting. Perhaps the next meeting may be more to hear from the young people, but also to focus that meeting on, okay, so here are some things that we're talking about, we're thinking about. What are we going to throw on the wall to see what we can get to stick? And then we can go from one step to the next. And I think the more we do that, the better, I would think, the support we can get from from the official people out there who keep saying that they're going to do this and do that, but they don't really know what they need to do. We have to answer those questions because this is our community, and I can't emphasize that enough.
And I hope you'll continue to encourage the old-fashioned media like the Hyde Park Herald to cover what you're doing, as well as the city papers.
Yeah, the Herald was there, so there should be. In
Oh,
fact,
good,
I talked to Mark Monahan yesterday, I think.
good.
So he's working on something, and that's the other thing I wanted to just quickly remind you folks is that when the police are coming out, they may cover this neighborhood. Almost none of them live in Hyde Park. Most
Yeah.
police officers live on the margins because they have a residency requirement. You know, they're like 1 block away from the suburbs because they have to be in the city. So they don't have the same concern for Hyde Park that we do because this isn't their house. They don't. They're where their house is located. They're not paying property taxes in Hyde Park. So their view of dispersing the kids and what have you is to get back to the station and do whatever
Right.
they need to do and get back to
Right.
whatever neighborhood they live in.
Right.
We live in this neighborhood, so we have to dictate and help drive how they respond to it and things of that nature. That's the one thing I'm going to tell you. I didn't grow up in Hyde Park, but I've been here for the majority of my life, and so I'm pretty passionate from that standpoint.
How do you think the public meeting tonight will go with Desmond Yancey?
Well, I have a feeling a lot of it's going to be about how the heck do I get to my car on June the 18th. That's my prediction. But you know, I'm hoping that after what because Yancey was Monday, he heard a lot of different things and has probably been doing a lot of thinking about it since then. But there may be some other ideas that come out of that meeting. And I've had some private conversations about some things. I want to see what he says publicly, and if it's anything that we've been talking about, I'm going to endorse it and move forward with it as far as we can. So it depends. This will be the Monday, Tuesday, yeah. This will be the third of 4 public safety meetings in this neighborhood this week. There's another CAPS meeting tomorrow. So and all I can say about that is, if you don't go to these CAPS meetings, you should. You know, when you can. 234 covers the part of Hyde Park that I live in, and then the other is 235, which is tomorrow. I'm not sure what part of Hyde Park that is, but it's important for them to see you. They even say that the more they see us out there, the better it is for them to go back to their commanders. Hey, the community is saying we don't have enough officers on the lakefront or enough officers walking the beat on 53rd or whatever it is we're asking them to do. That helps when they see and hear from us. So again, and if you can't do that, but you are aware of it and you can get your neighbor to go or your son or daughter or whomever, we need to have more people out. I'll be glad to be the spokesman, but we need to have numbers. That's what's real key. And hearing the silence, I'm gonna, thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to do this. And thank you for those of you who did come to that meeting, Monday. Thank you so much. And thank you in advance for any support we're doing for Halloween. I would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care now.
Take care. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.